I'd like to make redundant the camera in front of me just for a moment and ask you to close your eyes. In your head, I'd like you to go to your kitchen. Open up the refrigerator, open one of the silverware drawers, and take a look in the sink. Then move on to the bathroom, noticing any rooms you pass or any places of interest. Take a look at yourself in the mirror, open the medicine cabinet, and have a peek in the shower. Lastly, go to your bedroom. Open the closet and take a look under your bed. Thank you. You can open your eyes now. Odds are this was really easy for you. It's very odd for anyone to forget how to move around their own house. It seems permanently impressed on our memories, and we never even tried. The mnemonic technique we're going to cover today teaches you to associate images with places that exist in your spatial memory, and by doing so have them stay around for a long time. Whoa! Let me introduce Simonides of Chaos. He's a lyric poet, and Simonides has been commissioned to recite some of his poetry at a party. He does his job, has a great time, but he's only paid half. In a fit of indignation, he walks outside, and the gods, in a sense of instant karma, collapse the hall where the party was being held, killing everyone inside, mutilating them beyond recognition. People are obviously distraught because no one can recognize the corpse to give them a proper burial. But Simonides, how do you fucking pronounce? But our poet, by closing his eyes, can reconstruct the hall and remember where every person sat. He takes their relatives around and identifies the corpses. This is the birth of the Memory Palace. The Memory Palace, or method of Loki, is good. The Memory Palace, or method of Loki, recognizes our brain's natural ability to create accurate maps of our surroundings and attaches those images we were talking about last week to the landmarks in our minds. By doing this, we associate the image with our mental representation of an area. And by revisiting that area in our mind, we're immediately greeted with the image we placed there. We're going to memorize a new list of words this week, but it's important that we have a few ground rules that will help us as we become more advanced in memorizing things. Firstly, the memory palace that you choose should be a place that you're very familiar with, some place that you know like the back of your hand. That's new. Secondly, we should have a set route through our memory palace. This is so that we don't forget anything when we're revising. If we simply placed stuff around our memory palace and then reviewed them by wandering, we might forget something, and we don't want that. Thirdly, sometimes there are images that are really big and outlandish, right next to another big and outlandish image. And after a while, it becomes difficult to differentiate the two, and you may end up confusing yourself and forgetting what you wanted to remember. Our mortal enemy. In order to fix this, we'll place images inside or on certain things, or behind or under furniture, etc. This helps differentiate the images from one another. And lastly, just to remove any decision-making you have to do when reviewing your list, your path through your memory palace should be consistent, it shouldn't cross itself if it can be helped, and you should always go through a room in the same direction. For example, I always review a room counterclockwise, beginning with the image directly on my left and moving around like that. It doesn't matter which direction you go or what your path is, but it does matter that once you've chosen a direction and path, you stick to it. You'll thank me later when you're needing to differentiate between the 3rd and 15th president or whatever. Last week, we memorized a list of 10 random words, and this week we're going to memorize my grocery list. Peanut butter, bread, apples, carrots, broccoli, coffee, eggs, chickpeas, lentils, and curry paste. I just went through the whole thing in my head, and I'll teach you what I just went. We'll begin our journey at the mailbox. And sitting on top of the mailbox is Mr. Peanut, wearing his big top hat and his monocle, and he's churning butter with his cane. You can hear the squelching of the cream inside the casket, and you can taste the salt in the air from Mr. Peanut. Next, we walk up to your front door, and we see a giant bread roll the size of a beanbag on fire. You can smell the smoke, and a baker is frantically trying to put the flames out. He succeeds in doing this, and he hands you a smoking, charred piece of bread, and you take a bite. You taste that burnt bread, burnt toast flavor in your mouth. and you hand it back to him, and you move on, and you open the door. Actually feel the weight of the door as you push it open, and feel the temperature of the door handle in your hand. On the other side of the door, we're greeted by a magic apple tree from Wizard of Oz. It grumbles a few curse words at you, and then it starts chucking apples at you. Take a moment to actually feel the impact of the apple hitting you in the head. The more senses we experience these images with, the better they will stay in our memory palace. Moving on. In the first room to your left, picture an overweight Bugs Bunny, ravenously eating carrot after carrot out of a big barrel. Like an unhealthy amount of carrots, and you can hear the crunching as he bites down and his saliva as he slaps up the remains. And in the opposite corner of Bugs Bunny is a larger-than-life stalk of broccoli smoking a cigarette. It's angry, and it's yelling at Bugs Bunny to take it easy on the carrots. You can smell the stale smoke in the air, and you can see its lips yellowing around the corners from so much smoking. The reason I'm doing this is that it's outlandish and it's wild. A giant piece of broccoli I might not remember. A giant, angry, chain-smoking piece of broccoli I'm not going to forget. Perched on top of his head is a little owl, to remind me that this is the 5th item on the list. If you'll remember last week, the system for numbers I showed you shows me that the number 5 represents L. Yeah, we're halfway, and we're making good time. Moving on. We move into the next room, and we're greeted by a giant coffee bean coughing its guts up. With each cough we hear, we're hit by the smell of freshly roasted coffee. Imagine how conflicted you would be with the good sense of freshly roasted coffee and the fact that it's really gross at the same time. In our next spot, we see Big Bird, hunched over, and he's laying an egg in the corner. We can see his face contorting with effort as he forces this egg out of him, and it comes out striped, just like his legs. In the next location, picture an adorable little innocent chick. Peeing wildly, just so much urine. It is peeing so hard that the force of it peeing is lifting it off of the ground. You can hear the spray of the liquid and smell stale urine. Next spot, we see Barbra Streisand, dressed as Yentl from the movie Yentl. Now this one is a little bit difficult. If this doesn't work for you, maybe you could picture a proper gentleman, with a monocle and a tiny mustache. Or maybe just a big Yentl with a gun trying to take your money. Just a thought. Use your own creativity. That's what this is for. And lastly, on our journey, we have a car. I picture a Prius. You can picture whatever kind of car you want, but it's covered in paste. A sticky white paste, and you try and open the door, but realize it's locked. It's a curry paste. It's a long shot, but hopefully that will help me remember. With all these images placed through our memory palace, reviewing them is really simple. All we have to do is go back to where we started at the mailbox and see what's there. This technique and others like it have been used by all sorts of people. From people at the World Memory Championships who memorize shuffled decks of cards in under 30 seconds, to emperors thousands of years ago who memorized names of their thousands of soldiers, to me, who used this technique to memorize the titles and dates of all of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories. I've written a little tour of my memory palace, and it's the first link at the top of the description. The route we used here was intentionally vague. I don't know what your childhood homes looked like, but when putting larger amounts of information into a memory palace, sometimes it can get confusing how to use up all the available space. For instance, I know that for me it was really difficult to start on the ground floor when I had both a basement and a second floor to work with. It's hard not to cross your paths at that point. A solution I found is that this is your imagination and you can go wherever you want and do whatever you want. You'll see if you read the description of my memory palace that I start in the corner of the basement from a spiral staircase that I added. And say, for instance, you run out of room in your memory palace. All you have to do is, at the end, add a door where there isn't one now, and walk through that door into another familiar place. This is how your mental representation of your house and your friend's house and the library and the museum can become a palace of interconnected loci. Loci? I don't remember. But in a world where we have note-taking apps on our phones and written language and post-its, why memorize these things at all when my phone can do it for me? Well, not only is this technique incredibly useful for those moments where you don't have access to your phones or notes, like tests or prisons and stuff, but also this technique is really just fun. It's the invention of these crazy images, of these ridiculous scenarios, that keeps me coming back. You see, remembering and creating are two sides of the same coin. Creativity is an act of remembering two disparaging ideas and combining them to make something new. And by making our ideas easier to get to, by organizing the retrieval of this information, we're able to streamline this process. With all of the things that I've been talking about over the last couple weeks, it's no surprise that the word invention and the word inventory come from the same root. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Yeah! Mnemonics are done. We can talk about something else now.